Welcome back to Harbor. Well, President Trump took to Twitter this afternoon. He can't resist it, shifting the focus, he thinks, from the Russian probe to one of his favorite distractions. Well, from 2016, the FBI investigation into Democratic rival, you guessed it, Hillary Clinton. Here's a taste of Trump last year on the campaign trail.
If Hillary Clinton were to be elected, it would create an unprecedented and protracted constitutional crisis. Haven't we just been through a lot with the Clintons, right?
Hillary has engaged in a criminal massive enterprise and cover-ups like probably nobody ever before.
Her current scandals and controversies will continue throughout her presidency, and we will make it, honestly, look, it's going to be virtually impossible for her to govern.
Hillary Clinton will be under investigation for a long, long time for her many crimes against our nation, our people, our democracy, likely concluding in a criminal trial.
Well, let's bring in the Hardball Roundtable tonight. Heidi Presley here, as senior political reporter for USA Today. Jeff Bennett is congressional reporter for NPR. And Jonathan Swan is from the political news site Axios. Heidi, the thing about Trump that I thought was wrong was to attack Hillary Clinton for being investigated. And now it's come around to being he's getting hurt by investigations without being proven guilty. Well, the very fact of being investigated, he made it into a crime.
The irony here is, of course, that there is no way.
How tall are you? How they got your chair?
They usually move it. Maybe they forgot to move it down. They usually move it down. So anyway, I'll slouch a little bit.
No, don't. No.
Okay, no.
I'm okay.
It's classic whataboutism. But the thing about Hillary is there's no way that they could have put this many tentacles on an email server. This investigation is going to so many different knots that we're going to be tied up for years. And I don't think, regardless of what the Republican plans were in the Oversight Committee and the fact that they control all these panels, that we could have ever imagined this sprawling an investigative body over Hillary Clinton.
And I don't think it's hard to do the apples and oranges here, but there's an element, not treason, but something like it. If he's guilty, which I don't know yet, if he's guilty of having consorted with the Russians in any way to help them screw with our election, that's a lot more serious than the Hillary charges, even if they were guilty. It is
a lot more serious. I would say, though, I think the president does have a point here. If Hillary Clinton had won the election and the House controlled...
Is NPR defending the president?
Well, hey, hold on.
I am shaken by this.
If Republicans controlled the House, I think there would have been continuous investigations related to this email server.
You know, they said, well, Trump said he was going to do it.
The difference, though, is that the basis for it would have been largely partisan, whereas the basis for this counterintelligence investigation is that there's a really urgent national security issue here.
And it's bipartisan.
And it's bipartisan. The Senate today voted, 97-2, or yesterday, 97-2 for those Russian sanctions.
Well, it seems to me that this thing has a dynamic. I hated that word when people started using it a few cycles ago. But a dynamic means something leads to something leads to something. That there wouldn't have been something had the something before it not did. So what Trump may be innocent of, perhaps, it turns out, possibly turned out innocent of the initial reason for this investigation. Or it wasn't sufficient enough to knock him off or impeach him. But then he begins to take steps like telling Comey, get rid of the Flynn investigation, and then give me the loyalty oath, and then going to Coates and saying the same to get rid of the Flynn investigation, and then going to Rogers and say, clear me of any collusion. He keeps taking steps as a result of the investigation that could very well metastasize into an impeachment. That's his problem. He needs to be, this thing has a dynamic to it because he keeps pushing perhaps the crimes into the future. The way I see it.
And it's not just what he's saying privately, it's what he's saying publicly. So you just mentioned all the things that he's alleged to have said to Comey and to Coates and Rogers.
Well, as a result of good reporting.
As a result of good reporting, or in Comey's case, that was a little bit helped along. But
well, he said it under oath. I believe him.
No, I believe him too. I'm just saying he gave the document. That's how it got out. But what I'm saying is a lot of Republicans who are calling me in the last 24 hours drawing a straight line between Donald Trump tweeting about things and then leaks happening. Now, whether that link exists or not, we know Comey in his own words said that it was Trump tweeting about the tapes that made him feel an urgency to get this out in the public sphere. So Trump, saying all this about musing about sacking Mueller, I mean, I don't think that's going to make people inside the FBI
well, you know what I
less likely.
I like these leaks. You know why I like them? Because they're the same kind of leaks we got for the intelligence intelligence community when people like Dick Cheney and the neocons over at the Defense Department were taking us into one war after another. And it was only when we got the intel truth from the intel community that we began to turn the tables on these people, because they were not doing good for our country.
Well, Michael Flynn would still be in place if it weren't for quote-unquote leaks.
Yeah,
and this is where we have to distinguish.
Thank God the intel
leaks.
community probably does do some leaking, because otherwise we wouldn't get the truth. Anyway, the roundtable's sticking with us, and up next, these three will tell me something I don't know. And this is Hardball, where the action is. We're back with a Hardball Roundtable, and Heidi's going to tell us all something we don't know.
Chris, I reported last night that there was a lot of consternation at a meeting of lawmakers after the shooting of Steve Scalise. They were expressing their concern. Cedric Richmond, in particular, had approached Paul Ryan a week before. Cedric Richmond is good friends with Steve Scalise, and he had approached Paul Ryan. Yeah, about member concerns about security. Well, just a few hours ago, Paul Ryan's office got back to me, and they said, in fact, we are talking with the FEC to see if some of these House lawmakers, if there is a specific threat, can use campaign funds to help provide more security. So we'll see what happens with that.
Wow,
yeah.
That's something, Jeff. That's pretty desperate.
President Trump is set to deliver a major speech in Miami tomorrow. He's going to roll back some of the Obama-era Cuba policies. I reported this week that one of those things is going to restrict U.S. companies from doing business with companies in Cuba that are owned by the Cuban military. The other thing that more people will probably care about is that he's going to restrict the categories under which Americans can travel.
You know, I hear it's the biggest letdown in the world. The biggest nothing burger, those trips down there. People say if you go for 3 days, it's one too many days. Go ahead. Go ahead. It's zero.
Well,
Cuba is a zero to visit. Go ahead. Communist country's never been any good to visit. Go ahead.
You've thrown me. What was I going to say? Sorry. So this comment Trump made earlier in the week, where he said the healthcare bill was mean to the Senate Republicans. This is causing huge problems, continuing problems on the Hill. I was on the Hill today. Republicans are furious, senior Republicans in the House, that he would throw them under the bus like that after, you know, pitching
He jumped
them
on the House health care bill.
Right, he celebrated it.
He squeezed these guys to vote for it. Anyway, Heidi, Pressley, Jeff Bennett, Jonathan Swan. When we return, let me finish tonight with Trump Watch. You're watching Hardball, where the action is. Trump Watch, Thursday, June 15th, 2017. There are two explanations I can think of for Trump's behavior these months. One is he's guilty of having colluded with the Russians in the 2016 presidential election. He knew what they were doing in terms of fake news and hacking into the Democratic National Committee. He decided in some way to play ball with Moscow, and that explained why he's done all sorts of things to kill any investigation and why he continues to deny the Russian intervention last year. This all makes sense if he, Donald Trump, as I said, played ball with the Russians in a way that could be seen as treasonous. There's another explanation for what Trump's been doing. May I be blunt? It's that he's absolutely convinced that the country's regular political establishment is out to get him, determined to bring him down, kill the credibility of his election last year, kill him as a reputable public figure. Now, if Trump is guilty of consorting with Russia last year, I suppose his behavior these months makes sense, sort of. He's simply doing whatever he can to throw a wrench into the works, play for time, and hope he can wear down the investigators. If he's innocent of any game playing with the Russians and is simply afraid of what he sees as a coordinated hostile government media alliance, he should A, stop acting like he's guilty, and B, stop doing things that build the prosecutor's case for obstruction. That's Hardball for now. Thanks for being with us. All In with Chris Hayes starts right now. Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews in Washington. Tonight, there are new indications the Trump-Russia probe could reach deeper into the White House. Vice President Mike Pence has retained outside counsel now to represent him for the course of the investigation. It comes as NBC News today confirmed the Washington Post scoop that President Trump is under criminal investigation by the special counsel Robert Mueller for possible obstruction of justice. 3 of the country's top intelligence officials have now agreed to speak to investigators led by special counsel Mueller, Director of National Intelligence Dan Coats, Director of the NSA Mike Rogers, and his former deputy Richard Leggett. While Coats and Rogers refused to say publicly whether the president asked them to influence the investigation, the Wall Street Journal reports that Leggett drafted a memo that could show that to be the case. Quote, while Mr. Leggett was still in office, he wrote a memo documenting a phone call that Mr. Rogers had with Mr. Trump. During that call, the president questioned the veracity of the intelligence community's judgment that Russia had interfered with the election and tried to persuade Mr. Rogers to say there was no evidence of collusion between his campaign and Russian officials. Well, this morning, the president responded to the latest reports with a personal attack on Mueller's investigators. Quote, you are witnessing the single greatest witch hunt in American political history led by some very bad and conflicted people. Trump also claimed without evidence that the probe into collusion is over. They made up a phony collusion with the Russian story and found zero proof. So now they go for obstruction of justice on the phony story. Nice. That's Trump in tweet. Joining me right now are three national security reporters. Charlie Savage is with the New York Times. Adam Entos is with the Washington Post. And Shane Harris is co-author of today's report in the Wall Street Journal. Shane, you've got the great news story which follows up on what we had last night. That the special counsel is looking at the president for obstruction of justice. My question is, how do you have to add to that?
Well, I mean, what you have now is you have the president both trying to convince Director Rogers of the NSA to come out and shoot down these issues of collusion, but also privately still continuing to doubt the very intelligence that the NSA collected that led to the conclusion that Russia interfered in the election. We've seen Trump publicly talk about the fact that he thinks there's nothing to Russia. He doesn't think it could be the Russians, could be someone else. But to know that he's now saying this privately and continuing to argue with one of his intelligence chiefs about that, I think really reveals the degree to which this has completely gotten under his skin. And he really wants to try and shoot down the fundamental underpinnings of this whole case. If there's nothing to Russia hacking, how can there be any possibility of me colluding or me obstructing a Russia probe? So really going after sort of the core of that piece. And I think the people we talked to were surprised that privately he is continuing to maintain this idea that Russia might not have actually been involved in the meddling.
Well, let's talk about what's now in play in terms of what we believe to be true. That Trump went to Comey while he was still FBI director and said, kill the Flynn investigation. Trump went to Coates and said the same thing, kill the Flynn investigation. And as you just said, Trump went to Rogers, the NSA director, and told him to clear him of any involvement with collusion. Now, when's the moment of reckoning coming? Charlie, start with this, because if he has agreed to give sworn testimony to Mueller, isn't this going to put him in a box where he has to now say, all this is not true, as I've been saying it's not true, under oath, or admitting that he's taken part in this in a way that looks like, to the average person, like obstruction? Well, doesn't that put him in that box?
I mean, you raise a binary where he has two choices about what to say under oath. I would not be shocked at all if, notwithstanding what he said at that press conference, 100% he'll testify under oath, that doesn't happen. I'm sure that his lawyers were cringing when that came out of his mouth. That can't be anything that they advised him to do for exactly the reason you're identifying. And there's been a long history of Mr. Trump saying, oh, this will happen soon, believe me.
Well, let me ask you then, if you've offered one of these two alternatives. There's probably many in his head, but the other alternative is to admit the truth, as the other people have said so, and admit he went to Comey to clear Flynn. He went to Coates to clear Flynn, and he went to Rogers to clear himself. Is he going to admit all that and not have that not add up to obstruction of justice?
I mean, how
does he go clean at this point? Is it too late to go clean?
His story, of course, is I didn't tell Comey to clear Flynn. I just said, I didn't say those words at all. That's what his spokesman have said. Or maybe the more charitable thing is he did say those things, but he didn't mean it as an order.
Clinton tried
the way he speaks is so circular.
Clinton tried all that circuitous stuff. It didn't work. Lawyers know how to ask the right questions and get the answer. They're not going to let him slip by.
You know, the bottom line is that things are getting closer now. We now have Vice President Pence getting a lawyer of his own.
Why do you do that?
Why do you do that? Because the special counsel wants to talk to him, and you'd be foolish to talk to a prosecutor without a lawyer by your side. But that's only going to make all these other White House staffers who've been told, oh, you don't need a lawyer yet, think maybe I do. It's not a good time
told him not to worry about getting lawyers, and the vice president, Adam, he tells the regular young people, if they're a lot of younger than the president by a lot, don't worry, you don't have to lawyer up, and then the vice president lawyers up.
Right.
He's worried.
Yeah, well, I mean, we don't, frankly, I don't really see quite where Pence fits into this. I mean, obviously, he was obviously.
Somebody told him to lawyer up.
Well, when we look at Flynn, how much did he know? He says he didn't know.
Was he in a room? When anything happened, all these conversations, where was Pence?
My impression really is that Pence is not really a factor here in these discussions. That's at least been my
reporting. I heard it today that one of the producers here said that it's one thing to say you weren't part of a campaign event, because you probably weren't.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to avoid any involvement in something that happened in the West Wing where you're there. You're floating around somewhere. You know what's going on, right?
Well, he might be a fact witness to conversations. I mean, there's the whole issue of what did Flynn tell you about his conversations with the Russians. I mean, Charlie's right. If the special counsel is going to speak to you, you'd be crazy not to have a lawyer. So we don't want to overread the fact that he's lawyering up. But this shows you that, I mean, the special counsel clearly is going to go right to the top of people he's going to question. And, of course, Trump has volunteered to give testimony to him under oath.
Lawyers aren't free.
Can't make his lawyers happy.
Lawyers are not free.
No.
You don't do it for fun. Anyway, the president was busy on Twitter this afternoon again, taking shots at his former Democratic rival, Hillary Clinton. He's back at that. Quote, this is Trump today, President of the United States, by the way. Why is that Hillary Clinton's family and Democrats' dealings with Russia are not looked at? What were those doing? But non-dealings, what are these non-dealings? Anyway, crooked Hillary destroyed phones with a hammer, bleached emails, and had her husband meet with the Attorney General days before she was cleared. And they talk about obstruction. Well, there's so many leaps of knowledge here. Did anybody honest, anybody on earth believe sanely that Hillary Clinton called up Bill Clinton, the former president? Would you meet on the tarmac and see if you can get a good conversation in front of all the cameras so everybody sees you talking to her? Right. Loretta Lynch. It makes no sense.
Conversation.
I mean, part of what's happening here is Trump is throwing out shiny objects here and there to sort of distract from the main investigative thrust of what's happening. Yeah. I mean, that tweet is part of it. The tweet you read earlier about how Mueller's staff are bad people, conflicted people, is really interesting. I mean, we are only a couple weeks into this investigation, and he's already preemptively trying to nuke it as though these are all biased people.
Wasn't he about to interview, or did some people in the White House actually interview Bob Mueller for FBI director to bring him back?
NPR had reported that, that he was on the short.
So he's obviously in good faith. Anyway, joining the conversation right now is the White House. From the White House is Kristen Welker. Kristen, what do you make of this Pence lawyering up here now? It seems like everybody's going to battle stations.
Well, that's right, and I think he will be one of a number of top staffers who's going to lawyer up. Look, he obtained a lawyer by the name of Richard Cullen, someone who is described as being a criminal federal defense attorney, someone who has a lot of history in this realm. He's no stranger to Washington and no stranger to these types of cases, but it underscores, I think, the gravity of this issue for everyone in this White House. And again, Chris, I think that Vice President Mike Pence is going to be one of a number of people who are close to the president who are going to be looking to outside counsel as they try to weather this storm. I heard your conversation about the president's tweets trying to redirect the conversation to his former rival, Hillary Clinton. It was a stunning strategy for a couple of different reasons. One, his spokespeople will not talk about the Russia probe. They refer all questions to the Russia probe, to the president's outside counsel. And we tried over and over again today during the gaggle with Sarah Huckabee Sanders. But the fact that he's trying to redirect toward Hillary Clinton, remember, the FBI determined there was no wrongdoing. So in addition to everything that you all were just talking about, the bottom line is he's talking about something and try to redirect the conversation in a way that just isn't accurate. It's something that riles up his base, Chris.
Yeah, I can see that. It's good deflection. But let me ask you about a couple of things. The other day, Trump seemed to be very happy that he wasn't the target of an FBI investigation under Comey. He said 3 times he was told that, so he's vindicated there. And now he is, according to all the press accounts. In fact, every media, including our own at NBC News, now says he is, in fact, being looked at for obstruction of justice by the special counsel. Didn't that sort of change the mood there? We realize he's once again in the spotlight, in the crosshairs.
Oh, there's no doubt. A cloud has been cast over this entire White House, over this entire administration, and you can see it on the faces of the people who work here. This is a really big deal. They understand that. He understands that. Important to point out, neither he nor his outside counsel have disputed the fact that he's under investigation. He was asked a direct question about that today by a reporter. He refused to answer that direct question and again tried to redirect. But Chris, think about it. They have this agenda that they want to be focused on right now. Up on deck is health care. They want to see something get passed through the Senate. And this makes it a whole lot tougher. It makes it tougher for him to bring people together around his agenda when he's constantly mired in this and feeling as though he has to be on defense. And by the way, Republicans feeling as though they have to figure out how they're going to defend him or if they're going to defend him, Chris.
Well, I guess a couple questions that come to mind here. First of all, in the White House, do the people, I'm going to end the show tonight with this. The big question to me is this. Either he's guilty of something and believes he's guilty of something in terms of playing footsie with the Russians last year during the election. In other words, in some way encouraging them to intervene in our election or doing something for them or promising something to them or whatever in any way that makes him, you know, a fifth columnist, to put it bluntly. The other possibility is he just doesn't understand that every step he's been taking in his self-defense puts him further into the spotlight of a possible criminalization, that he keeps doing things to protect himself that have become the basis for an obstruction of justice charge against him in the Congress. Which is it? Do the people in the White House you talk to think he's guilty of something but they don't know what it is, think he's innocent, and think he's just being unfairly attacked, he's a little bit paranoid? What's the combination of motives for his behavior?
Well, honestly, officials here have gone into lockdown when it comes to the Russia probe. They won't talk about it on background. They won't talk about it off the record. I think they're really concerned about saying the wrong thing, potentially adding to the president's legal troubles, Chris. But I think it's worth remembering, even if Robert Mueller does determine that there was obstruction of justice, of course, a president can't be indicted. So it's up to Congress. It's up to the House of Representatives to impeach him. This is an all-Republican Congress. So the politics of this get very tricky. It's worth noting that the president has been in office for 146 days. He is under criminal investigation earlier than any other president in modern history, earlier than Nixon, earlier than Clinton. They both had their issues in their second terms. So this is really remarkable, Chris, and it marks a real shift in this Russia probe.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Let's go back to other people here. Thank you, Kristen. I think the question looms here. As straight reporters, front page reporters, A-section reporters, you guys have to figure out what you got for each night. But when you step back from it, can you sense enough evidence there to believe the guy is guilty of some sort of involvement with the Russians, or is it easier to see his obstructive behavior? Where's the story going?
I mean, based on what we know now, I have not seen anything yet that suggests there was collusion with the Russians. There's this weirdness that people keep forgetting to disclose meetings, but then what was that meeting? It was a public reception somewhere. It doesn't sound like, you know, a spycraft opportunity. It's the obstruction of justice.
You include in that, you think Kushner didn't have some stupid conversation with a Russian? He's the one I'm thinking about, the one who's
that is the weirdest one.
Prepared for the position.
But that's already after the election.
The widest portfolio.
That's already after the election. So the whole, I mean, the quid pro quo people think about is like, you hack the emails and put them out and we'll fix the plank on Ukraine and or something like that. That's all much earlier than all that. The assembly of evidence in the obstruction of justice, especially not about Russia per se, but about Michael Flynn specifically, that seems to be where there's a lot to talk about. It's not just this vague, hazy, abstract notion.
It's also more present.
Frankly,
it's now.
Yeah.
It's happening now.
Yeah.
If there is obstruction, we're seeing pieces of it.
Yeah, I mean, I find it almost impossible to tell where this is going, frankly. I mean, if you asked me 3 months ago, when it was Flynn, when it was Sessions, they all felt like just self-inflicted wounds. We were calling them out for lies, and the result was either Flynn getting fired or recusal. You know, I had no idea whether that was connected to any broader, you know, collaboration, coordination at all. You know, where this goes.
Well, thanks to you guys, we're getting a lot of dots on the screen. And the dots all show, Shane, you're the latest with Leggett, the dots all show a president who will not let things go their natural course. He has to interfere with this investigation. He has to call people up and say, clear me of this, get this case killed with Flynn, blah, blah, blah. He's constantly reaching out to try to find a way to stop what he thinks is a locomotive coming at him.
Right, and this is the way he's always operated. We know this from his days in New York. Look, he's 146 days in. By now, he knows that there's another strategy he could be taking. I'm sure people, if they haven't advised him to do it, to just stay quiet, he's probably absorbed that. He's not doing that because he believes, I think, he can beat this. I mean, this is how he got elected, was by coming at the people who doubted him, by trying to change the narrative, by hitting back faster and harder than he was hit. I have to suspect that if he thinks it worked for me getting into the White House, what am I going to do, change course now?
Well, let's take a look at the polling. I'm very suspicious of polling, but let's give it a crack again. Despite President Trump's tweets this morning dismissing the question of obstruction of justice in the Russian probe, a clear majority of Americans now say they think he tried to interfere with the investigation. According to a new Associated Press poll, 61% of Americans say Trump tried to impede or obstruct the investigation. That's 6 in 10, of course. 37% say he didn't. Watch that 37. I love these numbers because they're very similar in every question. On the question of potential collusion, 68% of Americans say they're concerned that Trump or his associates actually had inappropriate ties to Russia, while 30% say they're not concerned. I keep looking at those 30%, 37. That's the Trump base, right? No matter what you ask about, if it's bad or it sounds bad, they're going to say no way.
And the important number here is probably actually 2018. It's like, how is this going to play in the midterms? If the midterms become a referendum on whether people think the president obstructed justice or maybe colluded with the Russians, this Republican Congress right now is not going to impeach this president, I don't think.
By the way, there
a lot may build between now and then.
There's not many purple seats.
Well, I mean, yeah.
It's very hard to find which seats are going to switch, right? Charlie?
True. I just want to throw one more thing on the table based on what Kristen was saying earlier about how this is a distraction. They want to get health care done. Even before 2018.
A lot of people think they want this distraction so they can sneak that
exactly
health care
right.
bill through.
Usually you think about the scandal getting in the way of the policy agenda. Remember, they're crafting a health care bill in the Senate, not going through committee. No one has been allowed to read it. And we're not talking about that really strange thing because we're talking about Russia.
Now we have news. The Washington Post is reporting tonight the special counsel Robert Mueller is investigating the finances and business dealings of, I mentioned him a moment ago, Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law and advisor, as part of the probe into Russia's interference in the 2016 presidential election, according to officials familiar with the matter. Adam Entos, you're one of the reporters on that breaking story. Now you have to tell us. So I've always thought Kushner was the one that's least educated in politics and government, the one given the widest portfolio by his father-in-law, the one most likely to find his way into problems in terms of over-talking what he should be talking about.
Right. So, you know, he's having a lot of meetings. There's nobody else in the meetings. There's no note taker. There's not through kind of the normal process after his first meeting with Kislyak, where you had Flynn sitting in on that meeting. After that, things are
the Russians know everything he did. They know everything he said.
Well, he didn't, as far as we know, he never actually followed through on using their comms gear at the embassy. But anyways, bottom line is you know, the FBI, as they, you know, initially started looking at these meetings, they also were looking, in addition to the other things, at possible criminal activity on his part.
What about commingling of politics and money? Is that what you're looking at there?
I think that is something that obviously the FBI would be very interested in.
Like at the same meeting, you're talking about the good of America, and you're talking about the good of the Trump business.
Yeah, and you got to also look from the perspective of the countries that are dealing with Jared. They see in Jared, in that commingling of family business, if you will, where the presidency and business, in their mind, become commingled. They would be dealing with Jared like they would be dealing with, you know, a leader in Africa, you know, who also controls monopolies in the country. Yeah. They would view it that way. So I think it is natural for the Russians and other governments, the Chinese, to look at somebody like Jared. They see something. He's a princeling. It's familiar for them, and the idea that they would maybe make offers to try to induce policy changes.
That's what they call them in China, isn't it? Princelings?
Princelings, correct.
Yeah, you know, I think it's interesting because I've been reading today and hearing about the fact that after years of dealing with the Russians to finance his real estate enterprises, Trump has all these contacts, and also may have money responsibilities back to them. The gamblers over that invested in him, money that he may owe back to them. All these entangled relationships are all out.
But it's really important for people to realize this is very preliminary. This may result in nothing. Yeah. You know, and that's something to keep in mind. Well, the guy is obviously innocent until
I know, but it's
something
June,
changes.
And we keep doing this. Thank you, Charlie Savage. Thank you, Adam Entos, and Shane Harris. Congratulations. Latest news coming up. Republicans are starting to, congratulations to you. Republicans are starting to split over Trump's tweet storm about the Russian investigation. There's still an amen chorus out there behind him, but other Republicans say the investigation isn't a witch hunt, as Trump keeps calling it, that Robert Mueller is a man of integrity, and that Trump should stay off the twittering. I don't think there's only a handful of Republicans that smart these days, or that nervy. Plus, the congressional baseball game for charities going on tonight, despite yesterday's attack. The game is just moments away from starting, and moments ago, the players came together in the infield for a prayer and a moment of silence. There they are. We'll get the latest from Nationals Park. That's where the Nationals play here and where the Republicans and Democrats are playing each other tonight. And remember, when Donald Trump warned that if Hillary Clinton were elected, the country would be engulfed by endless investigations, guess what? And a possible constitutional crisis. Guess what? We'll revisit that now that Robert Mueller is looking at whether Trump obstructed justice. Finally, let me finish tonight with Trump Watch. There's parts of it he ought to watch himself. This is Hardball, where the action is.
Love it or get a full refund. Returns.
Our country. We
$5 off. Go to buylisa.com today.
We may have our differences, but we do well in times like these to remember that everyone who serves in our nation's capital is here because, above all, they love our country. We can all agree that we are blessed to be Americans.
Well, horrible. Well, yesterday, President Trump, as you saw there, called on Washington to come together, and today, partisan rancor returned. Trump took to Twitter himself to launch 2 early morning missives attacking very bad and conflicted people. His close ally and confidant Newt Gingrich joined in the social media assault, attacking Robert Mueller by name. In a flurry of early morning tweets, the former House Speaker tore into the former FBI director, tweeting, "Mueller is now clearly the tip of the deep state. He's a spear aimed at destroying or at minimum undermining and crippling the Trump presidency." But not every Republican agrees. Let's watch.
I would argue that the president has unleashed is partially, again, not in any way totally, but partially to blame for demons that have been unleashed.
Is Mueller's probe a witch hunt?
I don't view it that way. Look, the president's going to have to go through this, unfortunately, because it's going to take some time and be a distraction in some ways. But ultimately, I think at the back end of this, he and the country will be better served for it.
I would like to see the president stay off Twitter. It's not a witch hunt. No, I mean, I think that, he's got a job to do. We all understand that.
I thought that was a class act. Anyway, for more, I'm joined by Robert Costa, national political reporter for the Washington Post and an MSNBC political analyst, and Jennifer Rubin, opinion writer and author of the Washington Post Right Turn blog, and Matt Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union. Why don't we start with you? Matt, what do you make of the following things? We've picked up some information. Now, you may challenge it, as is your wont. But apparently President Trump went to Comey at one point and said, "Kill the Flynn investigation. He's my pal. He's a good guy, blah, blah, blah." Whatever the way he said it, he said it. Trump also went to Coates and did the same thing, kill the Flynn investigation. However he said it according to that. And Trump also went to Mike Rogers, head of the NSA, according to Rogers' former deputy, and said, kill this, talk about this collusion in the campaign. So we have a lot of evidence of the president going out and trying to stop the investigators, trying to chill them, whatever, charm them. Maybe that's your term. But why would he be doing all this? And how do you defend it, at least as evidence that this guy wasn't going to let an investigation take its course, that he had to keep putting his finger in the eye of somebody to stop it?
Well, 2 things there, I would say. The first thing is that I think everybody certainly anybody who supports Donald Trump and Republicans are concerned about what they read. And they're concerned of the fact that sometimes it's been hyped. I read for weeks and watched television where the impression was Donald Trump was under investigation. And then it took this whole public foray for Jim Comey to reveal that 3 times he told them he wasn't under investigation. Now we learned in the last couple of days that perhaps he's back under investigation. One of your reporters just said criminal investigation. So I'm gotten to the point where I would just like to know directly from the counsel, when he makes it public, what it is they're doing. That's when I will know that it's happening. Up to now, there's either been misreporting or there's been some very good reporting where they've gotten leaks. I don't know which one it is, but I know the second piece of this. All the lawyers I talked to, including the lawyers I talked to in the White House counsel's office during the Bush 43 administration, tell me that they don't see obstruction of justice here, and we're throwing around that term very casually.
Jennifer? Because I keep reading these stories and they have a pattern to them. The president will not let this thing go on his own. Now, you can argue 1 or 2 stories. No story's perfect. In fact, all of them are not perfect, but you put together a pattern, and nobody's really challenging, and not even my friend Matt here is challenging the fact that the president would do something like this, because if it comes out he did, he's going to say, yeah.
Right.
I knew he was capable of it. Why is this, to me, he's either guilty, and therefore he's covering up, or he has some sort of condition in him, says, these people are out to get me, I'm going to do everything I can to stop them, even if they don't have anything on me.
Well, it may be some of both. It may be that there's something there, and it may not be the Russian collusion. It may be financial issues, and you have to look at the team that Mueller is putting together.
Okay, you've got to nail that down. What do you mean?
Mueller has brought on 3 or 4 top prosecutors. Several of them have specialized in financial crimes, bribery, money laundering. Why are they in there? We don't know, but they've come onto the team. So whatever is bothering Trump may not have to do directly with the election and collusion.
It may not have to do with Trump.
It may have to do with
Manafort.
And it may have to do with Jared. So there's that there.
I think it's Jared. Because I think Jared has given a tremendous license by his father-in-law to take on foreign policy.
Yes.
It's unbelievable for a guy that's never done anything. And he may well have talked himself into something, and the Russians have all this on tape somewhere, and that's what the father-in-law is worried about.
Absolutely.
That would make sense to me.
Absolutely. And beyond that, I think you have somebody who has no conception that he's even breaking the law. It's not an excuse, but I think But I think
he doesn't know by now.
He just blunders around. He got himself a joker lawyer from New York who doesn't know what the heck he's doing. He should get himself a real lawyer. He should be quiet.
No, Kasowitz has now got himself a spokesman, Robert. I love this way. Not only are they getting it away from the White House, they're getting it away from Kasowitz, so that now the reporters in the White House, like Kristen Welker, who's a great reporter, can't ask, is not permitted to ask about the Russian probe at the White House, because you can't have anybody ask these questions because they must go to Kasowitz's flack.
Based on my reporting, Kasowitz is highly influential right now within the West Wing. People describe him as a mirror to the president's personality, the president's desire to confront the special counsel. He does have a spokesman, Mark Corallo, this combative veteran Republican strategist. And you're right, within the West Wing there was talk of having this war room to really...
What happened to the war room?
Disappeared. The president, Kushner, Bannon, Priebus decided to farm out a lot of these questions because they know the Republican agenda on Capitol Hill is so stalled. If they're not focused on that and consumed by Russia, they'll never get anything done.
In terms of PR, I'll give this back to Matt. You can argue that that's what Clinton did when he had Fabiani take all the Monica questions and did make McCurry ruin his career by answering all those ridiculous... Well, they were true stories, of course. That was the problem. It was all true. And if you had to answer it all and flack it, you would look like you weren't honest to start with. Let me ask you about Trump. Do you think he's innocent of all charges? Do you believe he had nothing to do with the Russians during the campaign? You, personally, Matt Schlapp. Do you believe that?
Chris, let me try to answer. I think he is not guilty of any of these charges, and I think the reason for that is after 11 months.
Answer it this way: was he involved in any effort to play? No. Did he? I just want a simple answer. Did he have communication with the Russians in response to their efforts to help him win? Did he have any way of saying thank you for that?
No,
I'm going to take it easy on the sanctions.
No, nothing illegal. Nothing illegal or inappropriate because, Chris, think about it. They didn't need the help of this presidential campaign to figure out what to do if they wanted to do something. What they did was rudimentary, and they didn't need anybody to help them do it. And I'm not sure this presidential campaign, of which I supported, I'm glad he won, but it wasn't exactly the most cutting-edge campaign we've ever seen. The idea that the Russians would go to the Trump campaign to figure out how to meddle with the election is really absurd on its face, and not one leaked story about any evidence of any wrongdoing on
all these conversations with Lavrov and Kislyak and all this involvement with Kushner chatting with these guys, and of course Sessions chatting with them, and of course Manafort dealing with them, and Carter Page, all those communications, all that stuff was just what, irrelevant, incidental, or what? You say it has no meaning to...
I can't speak.
Right now we're going to Nationals Park. Hold on, Matt. We're going to Nationals Park right now, and the injured Capitol Hill policeman is about to throw out the ceremonial first pitch. Let's watch. David Bailey. We're back there. That wasn't a bad pitch for a guy that's been shot. That's pretty good. No, anyway, he wasn't shot. It's so fascinating the way they've been taking this. You know what I like? I like the fact that the Republicans didn't jump on the fact this was Bernie's guy, if you will, that he was a volunteer in the Bernie campaign, because I can see both sides capable of saying, "Oh, this just proves our argument. These guys are violent haters of America."
Right.
Either side could have. They didn't do it this time.
You're right. You've seen some outside people. You really haven't seen elected officials. I was actually pretty impressed with just about everybody yesterday. They were on the good behavior. So I think they understand at some level.
Newt Gingrich is the usual bad guy.
Right. Exactly. And completely undisciplined. But I think.
No, he's disciplined, all right. He's just the bad guy.
Yeah, right. There you go. All right. But I think mostly, you know, they realize that it's a moment for them to look, you know, semi-responsible. Look like they,
there he is, with the crutches going off the field. That was wonderful. Anyway, thank you, Robert Costa. You know so much. Sorry, Ruben. Jennifer Rubin, you think so much. Anyway, and thank you, Matt. Good night in the barrel tonight. You did the honors, and thank you. Up next, we're going to go out to Nationals Park, where the Congressional Baseball game came for. Actually, for charity is about to get underway. We're going to take a look at that. We'll get a live report next. This is Hardball, where the action is. Welcome back to Harbor, where the Congressional Baseball game is about to get underway, one day after yesterday's horrific shooting during the Republicans' practice out in Virginia. Inside Nationals Park, there it is. Right now, you're playing we're going to show a pre-recorded message from President Trump ahead of the start of the game. Let's watch.
I want to thank members of Congress, their staffs, and baseball fans across the country for supporting tonight's Congressional Baseball game. This game is always an important moment for both parties to come together to support charity, build friendships, and celebrate our national pastime. But as you all know, tonight's game has taken on a much deeper level of meaning, beyond anything that we would have thought. By playing tonight, you are showing the world that we will not be intimidated by threats, acts of violence, or assaults on our democracy. The game will go on. I want to take a moment to send our thoughts, love, and prayers to Congressman Steve Scalise and his entire family. Steve is our friend, he's a patriot, and he's a true fighter. I know you all will be playing extra hard tonight for Steve. We pray for all of the victims of this terrible crime who are still recovering, including Zachary Barth and Matt Micah, both of whom are respected and cherished by so many. We also praise Special Agents Crystal Griner and David Bailey of the Capitol Police for their heroic deeds that saved so many lives. What a great job they did. And we thank all of the members of the Alexandria Fire, Police, and Rescue. In Washington, we have our disagreements, but we all agree that we are here to serve this nation we love and the people who call it home. That's the source of unity. And more than ever, we must embrace it so that on this special night, I leave you with three great American words that for generations have torn down barriers, built bridges of unity, and defied those who have sought to pull us apart. Ladies and gentlemen, let's play ball.
I'm joined now by MSNBC's Chris Jancy, my friend, who's at Nationals Park for this game. Well, Chris, except for a few exceptions, the nasty boys, we always know their name, Newt Gingrich's leading the pack. I'm impressed. I'm impressed that neither side, especially the Republicans who could have exploited this and said, oh, that's a Bernie guy. They said, okay, he's a volunteer in the campaign. He could have volunteered for anybody. We're not going to play politics with this thing. I'm impressed.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I talked to a lot of members of Congress who are playing out on that field right now within the last couple of hours that I've been here, Chris. And, you know, there is this mixed emotion here. Obviously, there's a feeling of devastation about what happened yesterday. Many of them are exhausted. They told me they didn't sleep. And obviously, they're concerned about Steve Scalise. And when they were doing the lineups, they actually put his picture up on the board, and he got a big, long standing ovation. Having said that, I think there is also a feeling here like they want to show the world we're going to do this. The way one member of Congress put it to me was, you know, that you're not going to stop us. And so it's a 39-39 tie. This is a long tradition dating back to 1909 with some breaks in between. And what you're going to see out there tonight is you're going to see the first lineup for the Republicans is going to be those members of Congress who actually were there at the shooting yesterday. And it was very emotional, I have to tell you, Chris. They had a prayer. Both teams got down on their knees in the middle of the field for a long time and said a prayer. There was a moment of silence. And then David Bailey, that Capitol Hill police officer who was injured yesterday, came out on crutches and threw the first pitch. It gave you chills. But now, the game's beginning, Chris.
Thank you so much, Chris Jancy at Nationals Park. Up next, Donald Trump during the campaign warned of endless investigations, even a constitutional crisis if Hillary Clinton were elected president. Well, things look a lot different now that you know who. Well, we got a special counsel investigating the president. Endless investigations, the thing he promised. If Hillary won, well, that's ahead. You're watching Hardball. Welcome back to Harbor. Well, President Trump took to Twitter this afternoon. He can't resist it, shifting the focus, he thinks, from the Russian probe to one of his favorite distractions. Well, from 2016, the FBI investigation into Democratic rival, you guessed it, Hillary Clinton. Here's a taste of Trump last year on the campaign trail.
If Hillary Clinton were to be elected, it would create an unprecedented and protracted constitutional crisis. Haven't we just been through a lot with the Clintons, right?
Hillary has engaged in a criminal massive enterprise and cover-ups like probably nobody ever before.
Her current scandals and controversies will continue throughout her presidency, and we will make it, honestly, look, it's going to be virtually impossible for her to govern.
Hillary Clinton will be under investigation for a long, long time for her many crimes against our nation, our people, our democracy, likely concluding in a criminal trial.
Well, let's bring in the Hardball Roundtable tonight. Heidi Presley here, a senior political reporter for USA Today. Jeff Bennett is congressional reporter for NPR. And Jonathan Swan is from the political news site Axios. Heidi, the thing about Trump that I thought was wrong was to attack Hillary Clinton for being investigated. And now it's come around to being he's getting hurt by investigations without being proven guilty. Well, the very fact of being investigated, he made it into a crime.
The irony here is, of course, that there is no way.
How tall are you? How they got your chair?
They usually move it. Maybe they forgot to move it down. They usually move it down. So anyway, I'll slouch a little bit.
No, don't. No.
Okay, no.
I'm okay.
It's classic whataboutism. But the thing about Hillary is there's no way that they could have put this many tentacles on an email server. This investigation is going to so many different knots that we're going to be tied up for years. And I don't think, regardless of what the Republican plans were in the Oversight Committee and the fact that they control all these panels, that we could have ever imagined this sprawling an investigative body over Hillary Clinton.
And I don't think it's hard to do the apples and oranges here, but there's an element, not treason, but something like it. If he's guilty, which I don't know yet, if he's guilty of having consorted with the Russians in any way to help them screw with our election, that's a lot more serious than the Hillary charges, even if they were guilty. It is
a lot more serious. I would say, though, I think the president does have a point here. If Hillary Clinton had won the election and the House controlled...
Is NPR defending the president?
Well, hey, hold on.
I am shaken by this.
If Republicans controlled the House, I think there would have been continuous investigations related to this email server.
You know, they said, well, Trump said he was going to do it.
The difference, though, is that the basis for it would have been largely partisan, whereas the basis for this counterintelligence investigation is that there's a really urgent national security issue here.
And it's bipartisan.
And it's bipartisan. The Senate today voted, 97-2, or yesterday, 97-2 for those Russian sanctions.
Well, it seems to me that this thing has a dynamic. I hated that word when people started using it a few cycles ago. But a dynamic means something leads to something leads to something. That there wouldn't have been something had the something before it not did. So what Trump may be innocent of, perhaps, it turns out, possibly turned out innocent of the initial reason for this investigation. Or it wasn't sufficient enough to knock him off or impeach him. But then he begins to take steps like telling Comey, get rid of the Flynn investigation, and then give me the loyalty oath, and then going to Coates and saying the same to get rid of the Flynn investigation, and then going to Rogers and say, clear me of any collusion. He keeps taking steps as a result of the investigation that could very well metastasize into an impeachment. That's his problem. He needs to be, this thing has a dynamic, the prosecutor's case for obstruction. That's Hardball for now. Thanks for being with us. All In with Chris Hayes starts right now.